All right, perfect.
Do you need to start this off or do?
You can go for it, Tina. Let's go.
My name's Tina Stride. I currently work for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Florida. I'm an investment accountant there. My biggest thing about personal finance is I really didn't pay attention to them. I knew I had a lot of debt out of college, but no one teaches you in high school or college or any grade school anything about budgeting. I didn't learn about it till it was much later from Dave Ramsey, and I paid off like $65,000 worth of debt in like 6 years. So that's like my testimony, my little spiel.
Amazing.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Sean Haynes. Hello. Yeah. My wife's back there cheering me on. We actually just moved here from Washington, D.C. about a year ago. We can go through a whole testament about marriage and finances and stuff like that at another date. I work still for a company in D.C. I'm a chief of staff and vice president over our international bank lobbying division. So our clients are banks who conduct cross-border payments and trade finance. I guess I'm passionate about finance because I'm not a very wasteful person, whether it's time or quality of life or money. So I like to kind of protect those things very closely, and I think money kind of falls into those kind of categories of how I like to spend my life. I like to have a nice life, but I also like to make sure that I'm not being too wasteful so that I can be using it for another purpose and hopefully a God-intended purpose.
Nice.
Hello, my name is Thomas Mcspadden. I work for an organization called Christian Financial Resources. We are a church extension fund is what it's called. Essentially, we make loans to churches. We're a fund at about $900 million of assets under management. I'm their controller there, so I'm in the accounting department. I'm a CPA, studied accounting at the University of Central Florida. Go Knights. And I'm passionate about finance because I'd say growing up, I was just very used to hearing conversations about money around the house, and so it was something I knew I needed to pay attention to as I got older. I, similar to some of the other people here on the panel, attended the Dave Ramsey course. My dad led the course when I was 18 and graduating from high school. So as I was off to college and was on my own, managing my own finances for the first time, I knew it was something that I had to pay special attention to. So that was definitely a blessing to start off on a good foot as I entered adulthood. Mm-hmm. So my wife is here as well, Rachel. She's awesome.
Rachel.
Oh, man, that was good. I'm William Colbert. I also went to UCF and have a degree in finance. I've taught Dave Ramsey's FPU class for the last 7 years. Really passionate about personal finance. When I was younger, my mom just told me to save, but, finances is so much more than just saving. So I kind of found a little niche of, helping others manage their money, get ahead, that are like me that didn't have that. So been doing that for some time now, and I really enjoy it. So I'm thankful to be here on the panel to answer some questions.
Hi, I'm Bob Cadle. I'm also a UCF grad. I don't. That's right, UCF. I know nothing about finance. I got my degree in environmental engineering. I'm retired at this point, and my wife Yolanda's back there. We're actually both we're building a house now.
Awesome.
So when I got divorced, after my divorce I realized that I needed to figure out how to get through financing, because I started over with nothing, and through the things that we've done, we're building a house. So what can I say?
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. And really our goal for tonight is just kind of to go and have a conversation, talk through some questions, and really just learn how to better steward what God has given us. We will have some time towards the end as well, just for any questions you guys have. So if you think of something, go ahead and jot it down, because we'd love to get to it. But we'll go ahead and kick it off with the first question. What do you believe a healthy view of money looks like? A healthy view of money? Go
I'll
for
kick it off. I think the first thing that comes to mind is being open. In society right now, it's so taboo to talk to others about finance. So one of the first things I teach people when I'm kind of going on a personal finance deep dive with them is don't be afraid to talk about it. You know, what you talk about money with others doesn't affect them really, so you may learn something. So that's my first thing is kind of being open and keeping that line of communication. I've learned a lot from people that, you know, from just asking questions too. Don't be afraid to ask questions from someone that you think may be doing well with their finances. But then the other side is that you don't know how everyone is doing too. So be careful of that. So that's my 2 cents. Just be open, kind of go against what society tells you too.
Yeah, that's super helpful. It can seem so scary and intimidating sometimes.
I would say like stewardship. I really feel like God's blessed me with what he's given me. So am I stewarding it well? Am I spending it on the right things? Am I like not getting myself into debt by living a life that does not fit what I make right now? So definitely stewardship.
So going off the stewardship idea, I'm blessed to work for an organization that deals with finances every day, but does it with a godly perspective and a godly mission. So we have 3 core truths that we try to teach everybody when we are making new partners with investors or church partners that we make loans to. And those 3 truths are God owns everything, we manage everything, so manage everything for God. So it's the idea of stewardship with a trust that God will provide, that ultimately he is the owner of everything. He will give us what we need when we need it.
I think that's really a great nugget, and I hope to learn up here as well. I think when I think about a healthy view of money, it's prioritization, and you view money as a tool in order to get something done, whether that's investing or whether that's giving to someone or whether that's tithing or whatever else. It's a tool in order to get somewhere in some place. It's not everything. If you've come here today thinking that money is going to solve all problems, it's not, right? So from a priority standpoint, there's something that I learned very young growing up, and it was that you tithe, you sow, you save, and then you spend. And that's just a way kind of that I've always approached finances. If I get a bonus and a paycheck, all right, I'm tithing, I'm sowing, I'm saving, and I'm spending. If I get a regular paycheck, it's the same thing, and that's kind of the principle that I've used in that prioritization.
That's really good.
I think Solomon said it well in Proverbs 21:5. He said, "The plans of the diligent lead to profit, as surely as haste leads to poverty." So you've got to be intentional about how you use your money, and don't be hasty to just throw it all away, I guess.
Yeah, that's so good, because I think that there are some people who are naturally inclined to be intentional with money, and then there are some people who are like, I'm just living my life, and money is just a tool to help me get through some things. But that's why it's important to have conversations like this, to have that reset and that reprioritization. So along with that, kind of talking about a budget, how much should someone save? How much should someone be giving? And how much should they spend? I know, Bob, you said you had a great rule for this.
Yeah, Yolanda and I are certified marriage coaches and certified premarital coaches, and one of the sessions in each one that we teach is a session on financing, and we recommend the 10-10-80 method. You save, you tithe or 10%, your first 10%. You save 10% for your savings, your college funds, for your kids, retirement, etc. And you live off the remaining 80%. And it works. Believe it or not, it works.
Yeah, it's a good rule.
I personally like to break down that 80% into some smaller buckets, just because a lot of things can get washed around in there, right? So you absolutely, I do believe 10% is a good target for savings. Actually, if you do the math, that's usually about 2 months of like your necessities covered, right there. Obviously tithing and above that with the offering. I like to look at like 30% for your core living expenses, and I'm talking about everything from your rent or your mortgage to cell phone to utility payments, 30 to 40% ish, and then that other 40% on depending on how your loan structures or your credit card pay downs or your other miscellaneous type activities that kind of fall into that bucket, but it still gets you back to that 10-10-80 principle. So that's why I like that.
That's good. I remember like being at a point in my life when I was younger where there was almost just like a fear of, okay, I'm getting by, I'm making it. I almost have this fear of starting budgeting, of starting to really examine everything. What would you say to someone who maybe experiences that fear or doesn't know where to start?
Yeah, I think starting, and it sounds simple, but I know it's harder than it seems. Kind of just starting, getting a pen and paper or an Excel sheet, listing out how much you make and how much you spend. Also, some quick tips I have for budgeting are start the 25th of the previous month. So we're in July. You should have started June 25th, so that gives you time to think about what's coming up for the next month, all of those little expenses that you forget in the following month. And don't be afraid to change the budget as the month goes on. The budget is a living thing. It's not chains, I think one thing that Dave Ramsey says is it's permission to spend. So tell your money where to go. Don't look back at the end of the month saying, hey, where did all that money go? Give every dollar a job. Those are some tips that once I learned, kind of helped me a lot of just keeping on track. And I still use pen and paper. That just helps me fill the budget a little bit more. So, don't be afraid to kind of go back to the primitive way as well.
Wow.
From that standpoint.
I'm so impressed. Like, don't you admire people that their brain automatically goes, start on the 25th? Like, my brain does not work that way. Like, that's why it's so valuable to hear these things. So that is a great tip.
Yeah.
And Tina, you're passionate about budgeting as well.
I'll say, like, I don't necessarily do it on the 25th. I get paid bi-weekly, so that's kind of how I break out my, like, I don't use pen and paper. I use a spreadsheet. It's actually kind of ridiculous. I actually budget out the entire year first, and then, like, every tab for every month. Like, I know where every single penny is going. I try to look at things that are coming up that month. So if it's, like, somebody's birthday, if there's, like, dinners going on, I try to make sure that I, like, allocate money to those things because I know that they're going to be happening. Yeah, but the budget, like, you have to look at it every single month, kind of quarterly and annually, so I can kind of just get, like, a big view and kind of just see if there are things that maybe I don't need that could be cut out. Or, like, it just helps me to plan better for the whole entire year.
That's amazing. So if you do plan that far in advance, what do you do when, like, I mean, I don't know, you probably maybe didn't know that gas prices were going to be what they were or something like that.
Okay, so if gas has to shift, then something else has to shift. So I know, like, right now, like, food is also shifting up. So
Yeah.
maybe I just don't get to eat out as much or do as many, like, fun things as, like, I was doing before.
Yeah, that works.
I think something that helped me in actually our marriage counseling that we had with our wife is that it's like short-term pain, long-term gain, right? So it may sound like she's like, well, I'm not going to go out and do as much fun stuff because the price of gas shifted. But she has a goal in mind, right? She's paid down $70,000 worth of debt in a few years, which is phenomenal. So she had a vision in mind of what she wanted to get to, and she was willing to make those sacrifices. So I know that's something that our marriage counselors preach to us, preach to me probably a lot, is that if I'm putting these constraints around money and finances, these sacrifices should be leading to some type of long-term goal. I'll say another tool or technique, because I don't get as involved in like a weekly or even really a monthly budget. I'm pretty well okay with where I spend money and things like that. I'm more of a bigger thinker, I guess, unless it's a really big expense. But I do have what they call a $0 budget. So like everyone said so far, every single penny is going somewhere. So even if it's a savings or stocks or whatever else, every single dollar is no wasted spend at the end of the month where there's budget. So obviously there's money to clear everything and move everything around, but a $0 budget, I would encourage you to Google it as a technique to use when looking at your personal financials.
Oh, so wait, not to go too in depth,
Yeah.
but I don't really understand how that works. So you're saying at the end of the month, like you literally allocate that money to either paying something off or
Correct.
savings or.
It's just another way of
Okay.
saying every penny works for you, right? Just like William and Tina said. So if you have, at the end of doing all your budgeting, you've done a great job, and you have $100 left over, my balance sheets wouldn't say 100 because that money would already be accounted for in maybe a stock or a brokerage account or in I know I have to go buy a certain type of thing. So everything is getting swept into its own buckets. And at the end of the month, there's no room for me really to do a whole lot of movement around of those
Okay.
funds. But again, it's being secure in how you spend and knowing where you may be able to move some things around. But at least when it comes to budgeting, at the end of the day, I have actually Key doesn't know this, but I've been rebalancing our budgets because we're looking at homes right now. And we have a $40 balance as a budget at the end of every month. That would be a successful $0 budget for me.
Wow.
And another way to add to how to add to what Sean said, it's giving every dollar a job. You know, it's not that you're going to have $0 left over at the end of the month, but it's every penny has a purpose from that standpoint.
So that being said, do you guys have any type of preference for like someone when they're setting up a checking account? Like how many different accounts do they need to have? You know, get
Keep
what I'm
it
saying?
simple.
it
One.
simple?
Yeah, keep it simple. One
Okay.
checkings, one savings. How I like to say it is have one plan. Don't have 5 plans. You know, if you have 5 plans, none of them usually are going to kind of come to fruition.
Yeah.
Yeah, as far as checking accounts, things like that go, the research shows that a joint checking account between married people is much more effective than separate accounts. The way you can make decisions between the couple
Yeah.
on how to spend the money, rather than me going out and spend mine and Yolanda go out and spend hers. That doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
I would also say like a money market account. I have a savings account, but a money market will definitely earn you way more. And if you look up which ones there are, like the one that I have is through Sally Mae. You used to earn 2%.
I feel
but
like
now
everyone is triggered by the name Sally.
I know they pay me
You
now.
have any student loans? And you're like,
No, I know now they pay me. It used to be 2%. Like right now it's 0.5%, but it definitely earns way more money than what my savings account earns. Plus, like I can transfer between my checking and that account without any fees or anything. So I would also suggest a money market.
American Express has a high yield savings account also, and I think right now it's at 1% return, and I think banks are 0.1%.
It's like 0.0001.
wow. Very interesting. So talking about budget and maybe you come up with, these great plans like you all were sharing, do you have any tips for just actually sticking to them, to see them through? And what happens when you fall off the wagon? Because we've all been there. We come up with a plan. Maybe it's the 25th if you're really good. And then something happens or you're like, oh, I'm just going to buy this. It's Amazon Prime Day. I'm just going to buy it. How do you, I know we're all feeling that right now because it is Amazon Prime Day. But any tips for when that happens or just really sticking to it? Thomas?
I would say it's a discipline. So like any discipline, there's going to be moments where you're going to, not be as disciplined as you should be. And the important thing is don't beat yourself up about it. Mm-hmm. Just kind of accept that this happened. You still have the same end goal. Earlier we were mentioning short-term goals, long-term goals. I think, again, celebrating when those goals are achieved or planning things out so that you do have those short-term goals. So it's not like you're just saving for retirement and that's like, oh, so far away or maybe sooner. But, at the same time, it's just being able to have a goal and a destination that feels closer and can celebrate along the way and not always just feel like, oh, I messed up again.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really, really a good point, because sometimes, especially financially, things can just feel like such a long haul. And it can be hard, I think, sometimes when you're saving something for something like that, because you're like, oh, someday when I buy a house, or someday when I'm paying for this, or someday I'm paying off my debt. So that's important. That's a really good point to think about. Okay, those small goals make a difference. Were you going to say something too, Bob?
Yeah, I was going to say that, if to pay off credit cards, for instance, you can get these zero interest credit cards that last for 12, 15 months. And if you can pay off, if you get into a problem, you can pay off some debt that way. So you just need to avoid living in the 100 way.
Yeah. I've heard of people, too, consolidating their debt. Say what you were going to say, William.
No, I'll answer
that
that
just
too.
popped into my mind because I have a friend who did that. So
I think the first thing is you just got to remember that consolidation doesn't solve the problem. It just moves the problem.
Yeah.
So one thing I like to tell people around sticking to the budget is, if you have those expenses or Amazon Day comes up, do the calculation on how far it puts you back in your goal and make an intentional decision. Hey, if this is going to put me back 3 months on my goal, am I willing to buy that? And if the answer is yes, then, you made that decision. So just intentionality behind it.
Gosh, I need like a little William on my shoulder. I'm just kidding. My husband keeps me in line. But really, that'd be great.
I think it's important to measure it, right? Like, if you're going to start a budget, you need to understand your spending habits. It's going to be very hard to just sit down tonight and just, I'm going to make a budget. It's not going to last. It's not going to work, right? I would definitely go back and analyze my spending over the last 2 or 3 months, come up with a plan from there. Next 3 months, come back, look at it. You did terrible. Okay, let's adjust. Let's go back to that budget and say, here are some areas in my life where I'm not willing to concede some spending. I really like doing these activities or whatever else. And then, but on top of that, I think it's very important to understand what the needs we have in life are versus the wants we have. Some wants can be delayed, or they may not be, you may not need them at all. And there are some core principles and some core things that we absolutely need. And that's kind of what should be, again, when it comes back to that prioritization.
Ooh, that's good. Clarifying needs versus wants.
I heard I watched an Oprah show a long time ago, and she basically was talking about like shopping and like asking yourself, do I want it or do I need it? And so I always ask myself, like, do I want it or do I need it? And so if it's just a want, I have to be like, okay, I don't need it right now. I can wait.
No, that is really good too. Even though Oprah could probably want anything. She could probably need anything, want anything. But that is a really good tip. I love that. So earlier, I know, Bob, you were talking a little bit about credit scores. How does a bank determine a credit score? And then how do you improve it? I know it's so hard. Sometimes there's this stigma around credit. And there can also be like a little bit of shame too, I think. Like, I've seen that, like, especially with people going through, like, premarital counseling. They're like, oh, my gosh, I have this credit score, and it feels like I'm saddling this shame. Like, I don't know if any of you have anything spiritually that you can add to that. I know, Thomas, you know a little bit about the logistics as far as determining the credit score. If you want to share that.
Well, I Googled it right before this just to make sure I didn't miss anything. So I think it's 5 factors are your payment history, the amounts owed, so how much credit you've been extended, the history length, so how long you've had lines of credit open, the credit mix, so that's just the diversification of if it's a car loan or a mortgage, credit cards. There's probably some, again, algorithm of sorts that they use. And then also new credit, so how often you're applying for new lines of credit through credit cards or different loans, etc.
Awesome.
All I know is that if you're buying a house, don't do anything.
Yes.
Don't make any big purchases. Don't get new credit cards. I don't know how they figure it out. I really don't. But we were surprised about our credit score. One thing I will say, you need to go back and look at your credit cards that in the past, because they may still be open and affecting your credit. So you
So
need to go-
unless you go in and tell the bank it's closed, even if it's paid off?
Yes. Yes, even if it has a zero
Sneaky.
balance, they look at it as a line of credit that's available, and that counts for or against your credit.
Got it.
So I definitely think CFA or someone more skilled in this should talk to this, and you should talk to somebody about it, especially if you have credit issues, right? From my standpoint, they look at utilization a lot higher than anything. So if I have a credit card with $10,000 limit and I'm spending $3,000 of that, my utilization is 30%. I couldn't tell you what a great utilization number is. I try to stay anywhere between 10 to 15, max 20 if it's like some emergency spending or something like that I have to do. But that's never dinged me too bad on my credit score, and I have a pretty decent credit score. So I would definitely look at the utilization. The reason why I said that after the cutting off credit cards, if you don't have a lot of lines of credit extended to you, banks also look at that negatively. Why can't they get credit from somewhere else? So if you're young and you have 2 credit cards and one has a $0 balance and you only have $10,000 worth of credit extended to you, maybe you want to keep that credit card open. Maybe. Again, you should speak to somebody with a little bit more understanding of it. But there's a lot of different nuances that go into a credit score, and you should use your credit wisely, right? It's
And the credit lines, like Credit Karma, is completely different from how the bank figures your credit line.
Okay, so is that almost like, okay, you're getting a preview into your credit number through like a different...
Yeah. So I'll kind of
Okay.
dive into it
Tell
a little
me,
bit.
tell me.
And to add to what Sean said, 30%, after 30%, you do start getting dinged. So that's kind of the threshold. You want it 30% or under. Like he said, 10 to 15, 20% is a good place to be. So with the Credit Karma, what Bob was mentioning, they have different versions of your credit score. So the ones that the banks mostly use are FICO, and there's probably 10 plus of those or more. So if you go to myfico.com before you do any kind of big credit purchases, that'll give you a better idea of what your actual credit scores are. And it also has a chart that'll tell you, like, if you're going for an auto loan, this is the version that most people use. And sometimes it's 50 points less than you thought or what your Credit Karma said. But I definitely highly recommend using Credit Karma just from a data standpoint to make sure your credit's accurate, making sure no one's kind of scamming or doing anything on your Social Security number. So that's some quick tips.
And the last thing I'll say on the credit, the reason why the credit is important is that's how you get financing from a bank or how you get lending. So they can either tell you we will not lend you money, or they can tell you, yeah, we'll lend you $100, but you have to pay us $500 over the course of the next year, right? So that's the interest, the cost of funds. So it's very important to understand the lower your credit score goes, the more interest rate the bank's going to tack on to what you have to pay them back in the long term.
Got you.
And you also, you don't have to keep a balance on your credit card. You can pay them off every month. I have 0 debt, and my credit score is in the 800s. So it doesn't matter if you carry the balance month to month. It doesn't affect it. The only thing that does is, when the balance starts getting a little bit higher. Because I will say this month, I had unexpected, car expenditure. So I went above the 40%, and I saw my credit score go down by 5 points. And I was just like, what is it from? And that's what it was from. It was from that.
Gotcha. Well, that's good to know. I'm going to hop down a little bit and ask Bob, I know you said you were retired. When should someone start saving for retirement, and how much should they be saving?
Now. Now, we, again, in Adventures in Marriage, with our coaching, we have a little formula here for retirement egg and how much it's your combined annual income divided by 0.08. Will give you an idea. And let me just give you an example. If you're living right now on $60,000 a year, you divide that by 0.08 and you get $750,000 is what you need for retirement. And to save for that over 40 years, if you start now, 40 years, that would be $215 a month. If you're saving for only 30 years, it'd be $500 a month. If you're starting late and you only have 25 years till retirement, it'd be about $790 per month. So it behooves you to start now.
And I know a lot of companies have sometimes matching, or they will help contribute as well. So that definitely helps. Yeah.
Do your best if your company's giving you free money to take advantage of that free money. So if they're giving you 3% match, you put in that 3% and you get the 3% for free. I work for a company, I put in 0%, they give me 6%. I put in at 6%, they give me another 16%. So I'm getting 18%.
That's great.
Per paycheck per year right now from a company. So those are cool things to look at as you're talking about benefit packages and stuff like that. If you're looking for a job, that really help you out a long way. And the thing I'll just add to Bob and how he was breaking down the calculations, and I would also say start now. Like if your company offers a 401k program, go sign up for it. Now if you're not already doing it. It's because of compounding interest. And the analogy or the fable that they tell is, would you rather have $1 million today, or could I give you a penny doubled every day for the next 30 days? A lot of people will be like, give me $1 million right now today, I'll go out and do whatever. But that penny doubled every single day, compounding interest, is like $5 million or something like that over the same 30-day period. So that's exactly how your 401k works. Not that advanced, obviously.
That would be great.
But that's the example just of the compound interest.
Oh, that's a really good way to think of it.
There's a book that only costs like $15, kind of like a good thing. It just kind of educates you a little bit. It's called Can I Retire by Mike Piper. If you guys just want something to kind of just look at yourself. My company also does 401k contribution, and I remember at Florida State, like one of my professors always just said, max out your 401k. My 401k is not as good as that. So.
Yeah.
Are you guys hiring?
Yeah. Kind of to that same tone, what about someone who doesn't even have kids? Like, I don't have any kids yet. I hope to one day. When should I start saving for college for those kids?
I think it all comes down to the budget. If your budget can afford it for one side of things, but now is always a good time. Anything with investing, the earlier the better. Some things to look at when it comes to kids' colleges. Florida has a Florida prepaid, as well as 529 plans are good from an investment standpoint.
So
for
what's
kids.
the prepay is like you literally pay for college in advance?
You're
for
paying
them,
a
or-
certain monthly amount, and they have the calculations where you're paying for
Wow.
it in advance. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. So definitely do your research there. Find a finance professional that can help you kind of do that and see what's best for you and what you can afford.
Awesome. Now, I know we kind of talked, well, Bob, you mentioned don't spend anything if you want to buy a home, but I know it seems like a common theme amongst a lot of people. Buying a home, obviously, right now is really tough. Do you think it's a wise time to buy a home? How do you know? I know none of you guys are fortune tellers here, but do you have any inkling, or have you heard from anyone kind of in your financial realms?
I think owning a home buying a home is great. You just need to make sure that it's within your budget and you can afford it. I would think that probably, why not now? It may not get any better. So we're doing it.
Yay! Yeah, that's definitely helpful.
I personally think there aren't too many assets that can generate as much generational value as owning property, owning land, owning houses. So if you think about it from that long-term perspective, then I would say the timing isn't as important because, again, we don't know what's going to happen in our 5 or 10 years, and you could do a lot of stuff with homes, rent them out, whatever else. That being said, right, if you're going into this market looking for your dream house, just because of the interest rate, you may not be able to afford it.
Right.
So just being realistic with your perspectives and going in and looking back at your budget and saying, this is what I can truly afford.
If you're a first-time home buyer, there are, I think FHA provides incentives or pays your down payment and also helps you pay for your first home.
All right, super helpful. I think we should go ahead and open up the floor for any questions. Anybody have any questions they want to ask? Jessica.
So my question is, so say if you have like long-term saving goals, like saving for a house and for retirement and stuff, what would you recommend the base amount of savings in a saving account like you should have for emergencies, if that makes sense?
Yeah,
That's a
I
good
think
question.
great question. 3 to 6 months for emergencies. I always tell people that there's, and that's for, the big stuff, so you can live, so you can, not be desperate during a time of need. I tell people, I've interviewed a lot of people, and nothing's worse than the person that's desperate going in to interviews and things like that. So 3 to 6 months where you can feel comfortable in things, if anything were to happen with your job or anything like that.
I was just going to mention also, it's probably not a good idea to rely on the 3 to 6 months invested in like stock or something like that, or to use credit cards, because if you're relying on credit cards to build up like debt, again, that's just creating more of a problem. And then potentially, I guess the idea of having it in stock is if the emergency comes or arises where the economy is currently down, then that's the worst possible timing to be selling. So you want to be holding it in a high yield savings account.
I'm going to slightly disagree with my panelists. And again, I'm not a finance professional, right? I'm just giving you my own view. If I'm young, if I know I do not have a lot of expenses, a lot of expenditures, I don't have a family, I don't have kids, I'm pretty flexible on where I live, I'm probably not saving 6 months worth of money, right? I'm investing more money than anything. Your risk-based approach is going to be different from 20-something to a 60-something-year-old. If I'm later in life, I'm going to have, and I have kids, I'm going to have 6 months worth of savings, 3 to 6 months worth of savings. Just because if something goes wrong, you have a whole family to provide for. Versus if I'm younger, and again, it's just my own personal opinion. If I'm younger, I'm much more okay on 2 months, maybe a third month worth of savings, and the rest of it I can use to invest in different opportunities for me.
That's good. Good question. Anybody else have any questions? Go, Paula.
Okay, so we talked about the 10, 10, and 80 principle, and then Sean mentioned using 30 to 40 for like your necessities. What if you've already committed more than that 40? And especially like with the economy we're in right now, there's not a lot of wiggle room. Where do you go from there when you have debt, don't have savings, and you're barely making it for your living expenses?
That's a good question. William's like, give me the money.
No, because I know, like, I lived it.
No, Tina.
So what, I literally cut everything out. Like, I got rid of cable. I almost switched to a flip phone because I was literally trying to make sure that I could pay that off. So it's a lot of sacrifice that has to go into it if you want to get to where you want to be. So it was telling people I'm not doing Christmas presents this year. Nobody's getting birthday gifts. Like, I had to do that for years. Like, it was sacrifice for a long time to get to that point. So I did the Dave Ramsey where it was like you save $1,000, and then like of course I got it to 1,000, and then something happened with my car, and there went the $1,000, and then I had to like build that back up. I was in an accident literally a month later, totaled my car, then I got a check for $4,000. So it ended up working out, but
So just drive safely on
Yeah.
I-4.
but like if that Total Money Makeover Dave Ramsey book, it's just like $14, $15 on Amazon. it will give you like the basic things. And even just like reading the testimonies of people in there, it's like a couple who only make $40,000 a year paid off their house and their car. And I'm just like, how is it possible it was cutting out everything. It was like no extra, like I didn't go to the gym. I used the apartment gym. I didn't buy a book. Like I went to the library. I didn't rent DVDs. I went to the library. Like there are ways to do things that is like free. It's just, coupons. I was using coupons, reading sales like my grocery list would be based around what was in like the Publix flyer and whatever grocery stores were around. I work from home now, so gas wasn't like too much of a problem. But yeah, it's just like you can figure it out. It's just like, what do you have to cut out to get to that point? And it is sacrifice. But it's not forever. Like it's like a short-term thing for a long-term. Like I sacrificed for a while, but now I have zero debt. Like no student loan, no car payment, like nothing. Like
How liberating is that, though?
Honestly, like when I first started going to Celebration, it felt like a weight on me. It was the thing that I prayed about the most was just like, especially when they were talking about tithing, I was like 10%, like is a lot of money that I don't have. And so like it was a struggle for me, but like once I feel like I like surrendered that, I'll tell you what, that 90% actually went, and I did pre-tax 10%. Like, so it was, I get paid $1,000, I paid 10%, and then like taxes, whatever else comes out. And I was just like, there's no way. And the 90% went way farther than like, I paid off $65,000. Now, I know that I hear people, some tithing testimonies are like, oh, the next day I got a check for $1,000. That's not my experience. Mine was like over time. I think God did that because he knew I had to like really surrender that to him. And so like I did. After I really just did that, like after a year, like it was like promotion, raise, promotion, raise, new job. That was more money. And then like it's just been like upward since that. So I think just stewarding your money well and trusting God with it. And then also for yourself, like doing what you can do with it, what's in your control.
Money's all about mindset, 80% of it, they usually say. So my answer to you from that standpoint, because most people's housing alone is usually 50% of their income, is, first you got to check your mindset. And then one of the things is your biggest investment you can make is in yourself, So on top of cutting things out, which is probably something you have to do now if you're in that type of situation, is, invest in yourself because you're your biggest wealth building tool when it comes from income side of things. So if you could do that, which is a hard thing to do sometimes, cutting things out and just
all
get
the time.
Yeah.
Honestly.
And because one thing Tina said is like, oh, something happened with a car and then the next month something else. If you're in that mindset, bad things keep happening to people who are in that, thinking negatively of those things. So, keeping a positive mindset and then kind of just taking action on, how do I cut back? How do I make more money? And even sometimes for short-term things, delivering pizzas, I think they say, whatever you need to do to kind of supplement that until you can, kind of change the tides from an income perspective. Because you only got two things you can do: make more money, spend less, right, when it comes down to it.
Just out of curiosity, not hating on Dave Ramsey by any means. Obviously, we've seen the results of his methods. But does anyone have any other recommendations or methods, financial structure-wise, that maybe worked for them? If that method seems too intimidating at the moment, are there any baby steps you can take, or is there another method that you found can kind of start you on that path?
I'm all Dave Ramsey.
I know you are. I know, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying that I know it's not for everyone, so that's why I'm asking.
I don't know about that in particular, but if you want to listen to someone else who has a good perspective on finances, listen to Robert Morris, The Blessed Life. He has some very powerful testimonies about how things have worked out through God doing things.
Awesome.
For those who are diligent.
Thank you.
And I will add, I was making a joke there. You got to figure out what works for you,
Yeah.
being debt-free doesn't work for everyone, especially how society's set up sometimes. So you got to figure out what works for you. What I will say is just watching your debt-to-income ratio is probably the best thing. And once you figure out something that works for you, stick to it, improve upon it. Like Sean was mentioning, relook at it, change it. Don't be afraid to do that.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Anybody else have any questions? Oh, Tina, you're going to add something? Go
I mean,
ahead.
I don't want to harp on Dave Ramsey. I just think it's a good place to start. I don't agree with everything he says. Like, I still have credit cards, and I use it for my expenses, and then I pay it off every single month. So there are things that are good in there. It gives you just like an idea and kind of like a basis of where to start. I mean, there's so many apps out there too that help with it. I think every dollar, but that might be Dave Ramsey's too. There are budgeting apps. There are budgeting apps that like will give you the percentages of like different things that'll help you out during the month too.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you, guys. I just want to give people options. Yeah.
She was mentioning apps. You Need a Budget. So it's YNAB, YNAB, is another kind of alternative to Dave Ramsey's method. When it comes to just budgeting or apps or different methodologies, I would just say kind of when you're doing them, be intentional around being truthful on what's in those categories and different things like that. You're only tricking yourself at the end of the day.
That's a good
what I'll say
point.
to that.
Good advice. Awesome. Does anyone else have any questions? Corey.
Hi, my name is Tony, by the way, Tony. So I've come from humble beginnings, not really had anything. Now I'm doing extremely well for myself. And working in the corporate world, I've noticed that it's taboo to talk about one's salary. Can somebody tell me why is that? I have another question after that too. But.
It's a good question.
I think for a long time it was frowned upon from a sense that HR, your managers, they want to keep it separate just because you and I may be doing the same job, but you may be getting paid a lot more than me, right? So I think that may have been one of the main reasons up in the beginning. Now, a lot of HR companies are starting to not market, but at least communicate what the salary bands are and where you are and what your improvement plans need to be. So I think they're being more transparent right now. I still don't think I would ever walk into, my buddy's office and start talking about, how much more money I made than him or vice versa. However, if there's a position open or something like that, or if we have a common idea set and we're talking about bonuses or something like that, we may let something slip or slide, but I've never, had a super open discussion around salary. And again, that's maybe because my organization is a little bit more transparent than some others.
Question with that really quickly too, just to add, and I don't know if this is an interview specific question, but I know oftentimes when you're applying for jobs and interviewing, they ask you what salary should you expect, all of these types of things. I feel like that is such a hard question, and I feel like, especially as a woman, it feels weird. You know what I mean? It just gets complicated. So do you have any advice? Like, is that something that's okay to ask for more, even if it's more than might be listed for the position?
I mean, I always start super high, and then they can come down from that, because if I start low, they're not going to go higher. If I say 80, they're not going to come back and say, like, you know what, actually, we want to give you 110. Like, I'm going to start at, like, 130, and then, like, let them work their way down from there. That's
good.
That actually just reminded me of a testimony one time I experienced personally regarding negotiating salaries. I was actually in the process of interviewing for a job, and I always negotiate. It's just who I am, and I think it shouldn't be taboo. You should always try to, establish a value and value yourself, what you're valued for.
Yeah.
So I'd say, first of all, do your research. Again, kind of like Sean was saying, a lot of this information is available online. So just being able to kind of benchmark what the range should be. Again, look at your own experience. Do I meet the qualifications of the resume? Do I exceed them? Things like that can affect it. But I just remember one time I was struggling financially and decided, I'm applying for a new job so I can, get more money. And I decided, even though I am struggling, I'm going to go ahead and tithe. And it was in the process of interviewing, and I did try to negotiate, and they actually came back with an even higher number than what I had asked for when I was negotiating. So I'll just say it never hurts to ask.
That's good. Yeah.
I'll just add one more thing, and the negotiation should never stop at your initial offer, at your acceptance. I negotiate, go back to my boss, honestly, every single year. When we're doing performance reviews, I am always pushing the envelope of how I can get more money. So, and it's not that money's everything, it's just that I value myself, at that level. So whether it's a bonus that you're being considered for, which is usually up to your boss's discretion, it's discretionary bonus, or whether it's a salary increase or whatever else, those are all negotiating, tools that you can use. And they don't work every year, right? But, after 2 or 3 years of going back to it, it may work that fourth year and it may make up for the other years, right? So
Yeah. Persistence is important.
Well, I think the salary taboo, so our director accidentally sent out everybody's salaries.
No.
He tried to recall it, but it created disarray because sometimes people who have been there longer make less than new people coming in because they've been there for a long time. And that's why, when it comes to, a new job, it's, negotiate as high as you can because, your raise is going to be, 2 to, maybe 6%. They're not going to give you as much. I mean, I've made more money switching jobs than staying at the same place.
Wow.
So I think that's why it's taboos because you don't want your employees to be upset and you don't want to also have to give out more money. You know what I mean? If you're paying this person this amount, that's what's budgeted for the year.
What was your other question, Corey?
So speaking back on the budgeting, I know we talked about how we give 10% tithing, and if something unexpected happens, you have to dip in. But how do you guys do with an unexpected blessing? So, hey, you got a bonus of $40,000 that you did not account for. Obviously, 10% obviously goes to tithing. What do you do to your budget now that you have an increase and you expected?
Me personally, that is more of an investment for me. So, or it could be something that I've been putting off, delayed gratification. It might have been a goal that I had for a year and a half, a vacation, or a nice bag for my wife. Nah, it goes into that category, right? So, I can bring this long-term goal in because now I have this excess funds, or it goes into some investment account that I have.
Oh, it's helpful. Miss Rain, I had a question.
I was writing it down.
Oh, no, it's all good.
When applying to jobs, it sounds like you all have jobs or have experience in finances. I'm in the social services field where our jobs are not as high salary. So when it comes to applying where most salaries run in the lower range, should a job that has a lower hourly rate but benefits with 401k and all that good stuff in a corporate world in comparison to a job that has just salary, but it's what I've been told in most interviews, it's not about the pay, it's about the work that you do because it's social services, nonprofit organizations and stuff like that. Should you look for benefits or would you go for the job that has the lower rate that already has benefits?
Good question.
I would look at the job from a total package standpoint. All of those things have a monetary value, whether it's health insurance, how much they pay, figure out what those numbers are so you can look at apples to apples, I think would be the best use case. I would also say, don't go for a lower paying job if you can't meet all your needs as well. So taking those things into account, I think is highly important.
Just to go back to the idea of, valuing what you do and, valuing yourself, I would say don't feel like you have to settle. Just feel, look for organizations that are willing to pay fair wages and give you what you deserve.
That's good.
And one more thing, particularly with industries that don't pay a lot, think outside the box. I see a lot of my friends who go look for the same type of jobs and haven't even explored other things that they can use their skill sets in that may be in a totally different industry per se, using those same skill sets too. I've seen people be very successful with that as well.
And then I'm not going to piggyback too much more, but a lot of those jobs as well, especially in social services, you can always become your own boss, right? You can do your own contracting, you can have your own business, you can get different rates, and you can go work for different companies versus just working for a singular company. So those are also opportunities that are out there for you, right? If you have more time in a day, your manager, your boss can't stop you from working more than 40 hours. If you want to go contract yourself out somewhere else for 10 to 12, 20 hours a week, and that's what you want to do to get some more money and kind of fund the stuff that you love to do, that's obviously another opportunity too.
Yeah. William, would you have anything to add? I know you're an entrepreneur. You've owned several businesses yourself. Anything to add to how would you even consider that in the circle? Like if someone is shopping around for jobs but they have a dream of wanting to start their own business, where would they begin? How would they consider that?
Yeah, something we were talking about before we all met was starting small. Test out the idea. Make sure it's feasible, especially if you're starting a business or a great way is contracting. If you have those skills, there's always businesses that need, an extra hand usually, and kind of going from there and just layering it on, seeing what's next. Maybe you then open your own doors, but always start small and start now. Don't, most people have this idea in their head that it has to be this grand thing or it has to be perfect before you start or, I'm going to quit my job and then go start. A lot of times you can do it, outside of your 40 hours and put in some extra work. So starting small is the first thing, and fail fast. Figure out if it's going to work or not going to work quickly. Don't spend time 2 years, 5 years. I did this business thing. Start it, be authentic and intentional, and see if it works in 6 months. If it doesn't, try the next thing.
That's really good advice because I feel like you always, and I don't know if it's like I see people in movies or what, but they're like, I'm hanging in there because I had the dream of starting this business. I was like, oh no, 6 months, that's a good amount of time.
6 months,
That's
you should
good.
know. You should know. If you're being intentional about it and things, you should know if it's working or not.
Awesome.
Sometimes things take longer than that, or, we'll put that caveat. It's not a one-size-fit-all. But
Awesome. Thank you. Any final questions or thoughts? Paula.
Okay, so this is kind of a very niche question, but if I don't ask, then I won't know if you guys have the answer. So what would your advice be to someone who is still partly financially tied to their family, and that family is struggling and does not want to go to a professional, but you know that there is no way out other than a professional?
I don't know the right answer to that question. I think there are probably people more equipped from a spiritual standpoint, from a pastoral standpoint, that could probably help you guide that a little bit more. That's tough, right? Your family, that's your family's everything. Your especially if it's your own family, meaning your kids or something like that, it's a little bit different view. But you're also meant to live your own life, right? I don't want to say your family shouldn't weigh you down. I think that's a responsibility that all of us have. But if you're trying over and over and over and over again to get them help, but they're just not willing to accept it, then at some point in time, from a spiritual health standpoint, you probably should, I don't want to say part ways, but you see what I'm saying. You probably should try to figure out a way to remove yourself from the situation, or at least take a step back from the situation, I should probably say.
Again, I think it's a really good question, a really hard question. But in our small group, actually, this past week, someone brought up the idea of there's hope when there's progress. So again, if you don't see any action on the opposite side where clearly action needs to be taken, that's when it becomes a different conversation.
That's a really good thought. I like that. That's good. Lindsay, you had a question?
Yeah, so kind of a comment and a question mixed together. I know you guys are all Dave Ramsey fans, and I think what you said, Tina, is really good, like palatable for first timer kind of stuff. And I think there's kind of maybe a phase two that maybe I was never aware of, because I kind of similar didn't grow up with a lot of both example or like means. And thankfully, God brought me a husband who was very good at that. So I've learned a lot in the process, and we've, had to figure out in marriage, like how to come to terms and find common goals, but obviously not basically just because he was and at that time better with finances than I was, like we are still equal. So that was something that was pretty interesting. But a couple of things that he taught me was through a couple of these blogs. Like one is called Frugal Woods, one is called Mr. Money Mustache, and they're very ridiculous. So I'll just preface that, like I'm not condoning everything there, but they're these bloggers that basically their goal is financial independence from a young age. So they want to get to the point where they're no longer tied, that they have to work. Okay, so they do some really extreme things, but the point of that level of where I feel like maybe I learned a lot in phase 2, because I think it's maybe the second step where for us, you can allow your money to work for you. So like it does require, like you were saying, Tina, a lot of extra work. But I've seen my husband do some ridiculous things in order to be like, they're going to offer us a $600 bonus. Yes, he has to do all of these ridiculous steps, but there's stuff out there that you can actually walk through. Now, I think that's not for first timers, but I think there's like a level 2. So just maybe if you're feeling like, oh, well, I understand, if you're in the room and you're like, I've already gotten the budget thing down, I'm trying to go to that next level of like, how can I make like money work for me or investments? That sounded super scary to me at first. Like once you get past the budgeting, you're like, okay, now what do I do with my money? So maybe you could give a little bit of tips on that. The second part question that if you guys want to add to, something I learned in this process as well is how many like hidden fees there are everywhere that people don't realize, like the common person does not realize. And the way it does, like obviously every company out there is trying to make more money. But we've learned through a lot of digging, and it requires research, but like you can go and try to cancel something and then say, well, it's just too much money. And people will work with you and you can get money off. Or like hidden fees with like if you want to upgrade your cell phone, you look that at the end of the day, you're still going to be spending like $800 you'll end up spending more money on your phone than, if you buy it outright. There's all these things that I think people don't realize, because the way they break it down is like, oh, your monthly payment will only be $30 more. But in reality, like you guys were saying, there's interest you're paying, and so sometimes I think that the common person, and that was me 100%, who doesn't understand that kind of stuff, you see that it looks palatable, like, yeah, sure, for sure, I'll just do $30 more, and then I have this great phone, instead of doing like the base package flip phone or whatever. So anyway, I guess I wanted to know like that level 2 for somebody in here for some of these things, if you guys had tips on how to tackle.
I'll just start really quickly because I think the level 1 is usually paying off your school loans or getting some balance where you can go out to eat with friends and you can pay off your school loans and you can maybe, afford a apartment or a car or something like that. That's very kind of like level 1 budgeting and just starting is a good place to go. And to Lindsay's point, that level 2 maybe comes more into the investment side of things and looking at where you place your cash and how it works for you and stuff like that. But going backwards, you should start with the end in mind, right? My goal for my family is to create generational wealth, period. So I know now the things that I have to do in order to get to that place. When I was 18, my grandfather passed away kind of unexpectedly. However, he owned his own businesses, owned all of his own assets, owned his houses outright. So myself, my brothers, my dad, my aunt, we all sat down at the lawyer's office, right before the funeral, and they're like, okay, each one of you is getting a check for $20,000. I'm 19 years old, a young black guy, right? Like I had no idea. I've never seen this type of money before, but that's a creation of generational wealth that my grandfather was able to do. And so at 19 years old, I'm opening up stock portfolios and playing around with money that was literally free money for me, right? So that's how I got started in understanding finances, but having that end goal amount. So now I think, how can I give 20 to 50 to 100K to each of my kids and each of my grandchildren? So I think that's very important for that level 2 or level 3 understanding of finances and retirement savings and all that.
One of the questions we talked about asking is, do I need a financial advisor or a financial professional? I'd say it depends just on the complexity of your situation. As you start to own businesses or homes or different classes of assets, it can get pretty difficult managing insurance policies and all this stuff. But I would say whenever you decide to start investing in something, similar to what you were saying about start with the why, but also make sure you understand enough of what you're investing. Because I'd say if you don't understand it, you shouldn't be investing in it. And I think there are some very simple portfolios that you can create that will lead and yield very significant returns when you don't hastily try and make money off Bitcoin or expect to win the lottery. That's not going to yield unless pure luck. So it comes from sowing over time in a balanced portfolio, and safe funds that don't charge fees. Another implication that's worth considering is, what is the effect on my taxes here? Should I be investing in tax sheltered investment accounts first, or should I be investing in taxable accounts? Again, that goes back to, how long of goals are we trying to achieve here? In the short term, maybe, don't put it in a retirement account where you're going to get penalized when you withdraw early versus, over time, the taxes aren't going to allow the compounding interest to build up as large of a nest egg when I'm trying to retire. So I'd say, again, you can give all this kind of stuff to financial advisors, but of course you're going to be paying a fee to them, but also just make sure that you understand what they're selling you.
Good advice. All right. Any other questions? Yes.
So, Bob, I know you were saying that in marriage it's important to have like joint accounts and stuff like that. How should you look at personal finance from like a dating perspective?
He's like, that's not in the marriage book.
That'd be a premarital thing. You should discuss with your partner what types of things you are interested in as far as finances go, and see if you're on the same page. And so that you have an understanding of where things might go. And when you're moving along, you're going to be looking at finances from probably, say, three perspectives. You would say you've got a discretionary amount of money that a couple could spend, one could spend, and the other, you don't have to know about it. It could be $150 or $100 maybe would be something that you could shoot for. Then you've got some more costly outlays of money that you just want to let the other person know about. Mm-hmm. You don't necessarily need them to agree on it, maybe. It would be a good thing to do. But, and then there are the major expenses where you definitely have to agree that this is within your budget, this is really what you both want, and things like that. So, but you want to be on the same page and looking at finances the same way.
That's tricky too, because like if you're dating someone, what if you think everything's all fine and dandy and maybe they have a financial history you're not aware of? Like, that can be tricky. Do you view it as a red flag? Well, it's a good question.
I think it depends on what stage of dating you're in, right? If you're intentionally dating in order to get married, you're going to look at your partner's finances, maybe, or you should, a little bit more closely, how they spend their money, you're going to know if you're thinking about marriage or something like that, how much they make versus how much they're their spending. If you're loosely dating someone or still in the very early phases, it's probably not as important unless you see some really unhealthy characteristics. To Hope's point, though, I would also say, and I hope my wife doesn't mind me sharing, but I think in even our own relationship, God had to show me really quickly, just because someone wasn't as strong financially as I thought I was, it doesn't mean that she's not worthy enough or whatever, right, in the relationship. So he's like, there's grace for that as well. So I may be very strong financially. She's very strong in several other categories, right, that we're not sitting here talking about today. But so I had to look at it that way. So that's another way to look at it, from a lens. Maybe your partner isn't as financially strong as you, but you feel called to that person, and there's other attributes that they're stronger at than you, and you are supposed to lean on each other.
Yeah, it's really good advice. Everybody comes from different places, different experiences, backgrounds, and we got to value it and learn from each other. So
And I'll get even a little bit more concrete. They said those things so eloquently, better than I could have ever. But especially depending on what level of dating you're at, never joint accounts. Most people don't realize, and I've heard horror stories from students in my classes of, I had a joint account with someone and they took all my money before we broke up. And you can do nothing about it because literally it's a joint account. So up until that point of marriage, probably, keeping the accounts separate from a concrete standpoint would be a great idea.
wow.
On a marriage license, and my wife and I, our accounts are set up like this. We have a joint family account, which the main stuff comes out of, but I have my own personal account. She has her own personal account. As long as the stuff's getting paid for and the things are going in the buckets that they should be going in, that's pretty simple to me, right? So, but that's just another way to look at it. But I agree, if you're dating somebody, you're not getting any of my money.
You won't pay for the dinner, Sean. You would.
No notes, no lease agreements, no houses, no mortgages, nothing.
Yep.
Unless they're a gift.
Yeah, unless it's a gift and you're willing to
Yep.
use it.
Fantastic. Well, any final thoughts from the panelists, that maybe anything we didn't get to touch on that you want to share?
I have two questions.
Oh,
Really quick. I wasn't a salary employee until came on staff at the church. I was hourly all my young adult life, right? How do you factor that? I struggled with this budgeting because it was like my hours would change. Sometimes I worked 80 hours a week, overtime, and then sometimes I worked less than 40. So it was really difficult for me to be able to budget. And so I knew that I didn't start looking at my finances monthly until I was married and had a salary job. And so I know that there are a lot of people in here who do work hourly who are single. What's your best advice to them as far as budget goes? Question number one.
I'm sure there's a plethora of information. You got something?
No, I know.
Okay. I think the first thing is to take care of your own four walls. So shelter, food, clothing, transportation, if you have a job. I think that's the first thing. We talked a lot around like debt, credit scores, and things like that. Take care of yourself first. If you got to pay something off and, that where you work 20 hours a week, make sure housing, food, and clothing and things are taken care of. Because your credit score, you can repair that, all those other things. And I think people kind of look at things and put a big emphasis on the credit score. And it's not important when you don't have the necessities in life as well. So I'll add, kind of to get a little bit more concrete, write out your budget, have those top things, those essentials at the top, and draw a line, and when the money runs out, it can wait until the next paycheck when you do
That's
80
good
hours.
advice.
So.
Yeah.
And then the second thing I've heard to never close a credit card. You just keep it at a zero balance, but never close the account. I don't know why I've heard that, but several people I've heard people say that before. Is that true or not?
Yeah, we Tina also shared some earlier, but it really depends on a number of factors in your credit score. One of them that we talked about was utilization. So if you have, let's say, $10,000 credit card and you have another $5,000 credit card with a $0 balance, and that $5,000 credit card you call and say, hey, I'm not using this, can you close it? for example, or it goes unused for, I don't know, 18 months or whatever the period is, and it closes, now your available credit is only the $10,000. Some banks, depending on what type of loan you're doing, will look at how much credit is extended to you. That's a factor of your credit score. So closing those accounts sometimes, depending on, again, a bunch of different factors, can harm you more than they can help you. But again, it really depends. I think we went over like 5 of the different factors that are important. But I always look at utilization overall. I think we shared less than 30 is a good number to be at. Anywhere between 15 and 20 is pretty healthy from a utilization standpoint.
Just to tell you, I actually talked to a credit person way back, and your oldest account, credit card account, they want you to keep that open. You can keep it to zero balance as much as you want, but because it's your oldest account, they say that actually looks really, really good on the credit report. All the other accounts, I'm not sure if it's 0% for the oldest one.
Like the longevity is
The longevity. So
I mean, I had a credit card that was 20 years old, and it had a zero balance, and I did take a small credit hit, but it came back pretty quickly. It wasn't a big deal. Like, the credit cards I have now are probably only, like, less than 10 years, and that one that I closed was, like, almost 20 years, because I had it from high school. Yeah.
I was just going to mention also, sometimes, you sign up for a credit card that has an annual payment. Like Rachel and I signed up for a credit card to experience like a first-year benefit bonus. And so we closed it once the benefit ended, just because it no longer, like, because you have to spend money in order to get the points back. So it's like if you don't spend enough to justify the rewards, again, it's just an extra fee that you have to pay for each year to keep the account open. So.
And how often are you really need your credit score? When you buy a house, when you buy a car, those are really the 2 big ones, right? The rest of the time you may have some credit cards already for emergency expenses. So know where you're at in your planning. Sorry, man. Sorry, I apologize. You're doing a great job, man. Know where you're at in that planning life cycle. If you don't have any big, looking at a new home or buying a new car or something like that, and you want to cancel some credit cards, it's not gonna kill you, because you don't even look at it. Probably you're not even gonna look at it, right? So it's just, and I think Bob said that earlier, if you're going to buy a house, don't do anything. So
Stuff to that too. As everyone said, it's multiple factors. Utilization. So to kind of explain what that is, it's pretty much how much available credit you have available, or how much credit you're using, the number amount divided by how much you have available, and that's a percentage. So when we talk about 10, 20, 30%, it's that. So usually when you close it, you're changing that bottom number, so the percentage goes up. So you instantly get a hit from that. As they mentioned, if it's a credit card you had for a long time, history, as Thomas mentioned, is part of your credit score. So if you close that, the number of years of your credit kind of drops, so that hurts you as well. One thing I will mention, since everyone's talking around like accounts that can go a long time at a zero balance, be careful. Some of them have dormant account fees, and you don't remember, and then you don't get the bill, and you don't pay that, and then now you miss the payment.
Account fee?
It's if you haven't. Sometimes every credit card company is different, but if you haven't used it in 6 months or a year, they'll charge you a fee, and you won't see it, and then you won't pay it. And now you miss the payment, so then that hurts your credit score. So, be careful of those as well.
That was sneaky.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, got time for one final question. I know we're a little bit over, so thank you guys for your patience.
Okay.
Go ahead, Miss Raina.
Hi. What are your views on personal loans if, say, you're young, you're single, but can't find employment and you're living off of your savings, but you have open credit cards that are accumulating debt because you're also using your credit cards, because some bills you don't have enough money in your savings to pay those bills, so you put them on your credit cards. At what point should you ever resort to taking out a personal loan if you already have like accumulated debt in school, cars, credit cards, but you have to pay something somehow?
So you're essentially what they say robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? You're taking out money somewhere to pay a different credit card. And a lot of credit cards don't allow you to pay a credit card with the credit card. However, there are options, and I think Bob may have mentioned it earlier, of these 0% credit cards. They don't come with any points, no frills attached to them. And it's extension of your credit, so you have to be approved from it. But you can get a 18-month, 0% interest rate credit card, and you can transfer. You do have to pay a fee for the transfer, like a 3% fee or something like that. But you can move the money into there, and you can pay it down a little bit faster if you have like a very high credit card interest rate, 20 plus or whatever interest rate. That may be an opportunity for you to do versus getting a bank loan to pay off your credit cards. But
I've done that. I wouldn't do it. Because now it's just like, let's say you take $7,500. Now it's $7,500, and the rate on them is actually much higher than what I was paying on my credit cards. So it wasn't worth it. It was just $7,500 more that I had to pay. Plus, you have to pay that back right away. So even though you're taking $150 a month from that loan to pay off these other things, you also have to pay $150 a month on that loan. So now you've got and now you're paying interest on that loan. So I wouldn't recommend that. The transferring the balances, I Chase Slate card, I don't know if they still do it. The transfer fee was $0. It didn't charge me any percentage, and it was 0% APR for an entire 18 months, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I was able to pay that. I moved everything to that credit card, and then I paid that off first from everything else. And it didn't accumulate any interest during that 18 months.
Wow.
Just to add on the same thing, debt consolidation, balance transfers, if you can find a good card, and someone mentioned earlier, look at the fees, look at the fine print. But try to solve the symptom first, I think, is the most important part. A lot of times, the cause, I'm sorry. A lot of times the transfers and things are symptoms of other money habits, or like you said, a job, losing a job and stuff. Try to work on solving the cause of the problem first, and hopefully you get in a situation where then you can kind of start digging your way out of that.
Good question. All right. Any final thoughts or anything we didn't get to discuss that you all want to share? All right.
Something that maybe, I don't know
Yeah,
if you
Yoli.
guys, anyone is in the same situation, but we have the family plan that we had 3 or sometimes more, 4 devices in one plan. So it's a lot cheaper to divide the monthly payment amongst 3 or 4 people than to have only one phone. We have unlimited text, unlimited messages on the internet, Wi-Fi, everything you name it, and the brothers. And so we divided among Bob and I, of course, one person, but my son is in the plan, and you can add other people in the plan, and that reduces your monthly payment to almost like $50.
Wow, that's nice. So even if you're not currently living with your family.
No, you don't have to live with a person. It can be another state too.
All right. Awesome. Any other final thoughts?
tithe, sow, save, spend.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. Thanks to everyone for coming, and thank you to our incredible panelists for all of that wisdom. I know I learned a lot tonight, so hoping you all did as well. Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate you all, again, just being giving of your time and your wisdom and really sharing with us. It's clear that you guys are really gifted in your passion and what you do, so we really, really appreciate you all taking the time to be here tonight. So thank you. Awesome. Thank you, guys.